Good evening and welcome to another edition of NewsFeed for October 15th, 2000. I'm Andrea Herzog.
And I'm Matt Engelberg. Our top stories tonight include mudslides in Switzerland, Serbian talks hit a bumpy road, and U.S. sailors returning home. But first, let's get to our campus news. The Peace and Justice Commission at the University of Michigan Student Assembly is offering a class on affirmative action throughout the next 10 days. The class, titled Affirmative Action 102, was created in response to the 2 lawsuits against the University of Michigan's affirmative action policies. The educational series seeks to provide the university community with the background information necessary to appreciate the critical importance of the outcome of these trials. Everyone from experts to activists from around the country will share their knowledge and experience on scientific, legal, political, and social issues involved in these trials, and they will debate on affirmative action. Programs within the class will include a variety of information on several aspects of the affirmative action debate. Organizers hope the programs will help students and alumni and university employees better understand the university's position on the affirmative action matter.
The University of Michigan Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center will be hosting their annual Speak Out tomorrow night from 7 to 10 p.m. in the Michigan Ballroom. The Speak Out plans to provide a forum for survivors of sexual assault to share their stories. Both women and men are welcome to attend in support of survivors. This is the 14th year for the forum, which has helped survivors cope with their traumatic experiences. In addition to the forum, SAPAC will also be sponsoring the Clothesline Project, which provides survivors an opportunity to design their own shirt. The shirts added to the Clothesline exhibit will be displayed in the Michigan Union. NewsFeed will have complete coverage of the forum, including interviews, tomorrow night.
The University of Michigan Regents are scheduled to hold their monthly meeting on the Ann Arbor campus this Friday, October 20th. Individuals with disabilities who wish to attend the meeting and need assistance should contact the Regents office as soon as possible. Call 734-764-3883 or write to the Regents office, that's Fleming Administration Building, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, 48109.
Hundreds of pounds of clay from New Mexico have been shipped and driven to the university for a course in pottery making as employed by the guerrilla Apache Nation at the end of the 19th century. U of M anthropologist Richard Ford has been transporting much of the clay from northern New Mexico to this joint venture for the Institute for the Humanities and the School of Art and Design. Felipe Ortega, recognized as a master potter in the Apache tradition by the Smithsonian Institute and U of M's Norman Freeling, visiting professor, will be teaching a mini course in Mayaceous clay pottery making. The classes will extend over 5 weeks, beginning from 3 to 6 p.m. on October 13th and held each Friday in room 1269 of the Art and Architecture building. The clay is self-tempering with tiny but abundant flakes of sparkling mica. They strengthen the clay body of the pot and insulate the walls for superior cooking performance.
All right, now for a local/campus news story. State Street in Ann Arbor between Washington and Liberty Streets will be closed to traffic on the afternoon of October 20th, that's again this Friday, for a street fair that is part of the opening celebration of the renovated new Lane Hall, the new home to the University of Michigan Institute for Research on Women and Gender Studies and the UM Women's Studies program. The Lane Hall celebration is a culmination of more than 2 years of planning and construction. The public is invited to attend all the events associated with the opening celebration, including panel discussions, a film festival, and a variety of performances, activities, and displays. The celebration includes a noon to 4 p.m. street fair on State Street with musical groups and vendors. The street will be closed to traffic from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. A ribbon ceremony, an official dedication of Lane Hall, located at State Street and Washington Streets once again, will take place at noon on October 20th right in front of the building.
And in more local news, education reformers and politicians such as Senator John McCain of Arizona are watching as Michigan voters decide November 7th whether to use public funds to support private schools. California has a similar ballot initiative, but because it is a much broader and affects all students, its chances are considered slim. Michigan's proposal, at least initially, would give vouchers to attend private schools only to students in failing districts. In the few places where vouchers have succeeded, they were instituted by legislation and not by ballots. And voters tend to vote no on complicated issues such as this one. Opponents fear struggling schools will get even worse because they will lose funding if and when the students leave. Plus, there will be additional strain on public funds as voucher payments go to students already in private schools who now pay tuition themselves. For instance, opponents claim that as many as 15,000 students in the Detroit district already attend private schools. Therefore, 15,000 less students would immediately stop paying public school taxes if the proposal was passed.
All right, in more election coverage, worker shortages and police contracts with area municipalities emerged as the main issues in a debate Saturday morning between the Washtenaw County Sheriff Ron Shebel and his challenger Sergeant Dan Minzy. The race is being watched as one of the hotter local contests in the November election. Minzy and Shebel faced off at a regular meeting of the Bipartisan Citizens Caucus held at the VWF Hall in Ypsilanti. Peter B. Fletcher, president of the Credit Bureau of Ypsilanti, moderated the debate. A Republican, Shebel was appointed sheriff in 1984 and in 4 elections no opponent has come within 10,000 votes of him. Minzy, a Democrat with 20 years of experience in the Sheriff Department, is endorsed by the Washtenaw County Deputy Sheriff's Office Association and Police Officers Association in Ypsilanti, as well as Milan, as well as Eastern Michigan University. And coming up next on NewsFeed, we'll have complete coverage of the families that have returned after that ship bombing. That's all, plus a lot more national and international news, so keep it right here.
Thanks for sticking with NewsFeed. In national news tonight, families and friends greeted 33 wounded U.S. sailors from the USS Cole upon their arrival at their home base in Norfolk, Virginia today. Other relatives had to wait as more badly injured sailors were brought off the aircraft on stretchers. Navy officials said once the injured are reunited with their families, they'll move to the nearby Portsmouth Naval Hospital for further treatment. The injuries range from broken ribs and collapsed lungs to multiple fractures and burns. Hundreds of Navy sailors and officers in dress whites and civilians waving U.S. flags had gathered at the base to show support for the injured and their families. While the Atlantic Fleet Band played lively tunes, all flags were at half-staff in memory of the 17 killed in the bombing of Cole last Thursday in Yemen, 5 of which have been recovered so far. Navy officials refused to give the names of the returning sailors, citing security concerns, but are happy that they were able to come back to their families.
All right, President Clinton outlined his expectations Saturday for the upcoming Mideast Emergency Summit, calling for an end to the violence. Agreement on the fact-finding commission and a recognition that the Israelis and Palestinians need to return to formal peace negotiations. Administration officials are working on a draft summit declaration that condemns violence but in the region, but desperately, for now, avoids the contentious issue of who is to blame for the unrest these past few weeks. Clinton announced he would take part of the summit early Saturday morning after United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan confirmed that Israel Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian Authority President Yasser Arafat would travel to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to attend Monday's meeting. Clinton administration sources say there is belief that there will be a tentative Israeli-Palestinian agreement on a U.S.-led fact-finding inquiry onto the roots of the violence. Under a compromise being pushed by Clinton, the United States would lead the review while including some other international representatives on the panel.
About 15,000 supporters attended Madison Square Garden to voice their enthusiastic approval for Green Party presidential candidate Ralph Nader. In an hour-long speech, Nader assailed big business for what he called a corporate crime wave and said the Democratic and Republican parties were controlled by corporations. Concerning a number of issues, the lifelong consumer advocate accused politicians and businesses of failing the country. Other speakers assailed Texas Governor George W. Bush and Vice President Al Gore as ideologically similar candidates. They said the two have similar views on trade, foreign policy, and the war on drugs. The crowd paid $20 each for tickets to the Friday night rally, and cardboard boxes were passed to the crowd to collect donations. Nader, meanwhile, raised $4.7 million on his way toward its fundraising goal of $5 million, with small personal checks from supporters, volunteer-hosted house parties, and rallies like the one at the Garden.
Moving on now to international news. Floods and landslides have swept through southern Europe and left at least 7 people dead in Italy and 15 more missing in Switzerland. The floods and landslides swept through northern Italy today after burying a village in the southern Swiss Alps the day before. 24 inches of rain have fallen in 2 days in the Alps, linking Italy, Switzerland, and France. Rock slides and rushing water cut off many of the villages in Italy, and high water shut down rail lines and roads. Swiss rescue workers resumed the search earlier today for those bodies who were vanished when the mudslide swept away a third of its villages on the Swiss-Italian border on Saturday, despite continued torrential rains. The risk of further landslides delayed some 110 rescuers, including Army troops, from resuming the search until today. Well, we hope that they would get back to that search earlier tomorrow. Andrea?
We sure do. And in more international news, supporters of Yugoslavian presidents and allies of the former leader Slobodan Milosevic have agreed to hold new elections in Serbia on December 24th. The two sides had more than 4 hours of talks on Saturday evening. The leading reformer said afterwards that Milosevic's Socialist Party has agreed to dissolve the Serbian parliament on October 24th. He said Milosevic's party wants to get the agreement of its membership to the plan, which could see it swept from power. The old regime has been dragging its feet since mass protests earlier this month forced Milosevic to admit that he had lost September's presidential elections. Twice in the past week, Kostanica's backers have announced that they have reached deals with socialists, only for the socialists to later counter that nothing has been finalized. No final deal has been reached on the setting of an interim government to run Yugoslavia's dominant republic until then, although the president's camp insisted that the decision is close.
Well, a small plane crashed Saturday near nearby Mexican military base in Baja, California, killing 6 Americans working with a volunteer doctors group. The plane went down at about 11 a.m. while they were trying to land at a military air base outside the coastal city about 50 miles south of the border of California. The plane crashed in a residential area near the airport as it tried to land. However, no one on the ground was hurt. 4 women and 2 men, all California residents, were aboard, but names were not immediately released because relatives were still being notified. A pilot and president of the Los Gatos, California chapter group said the 6 passengers had been at a seminar focusing on building a working relationship with Mexico, where the group provides free medical care. All right, and when we come back, Andy Gossard will have complete weekend coverage of all the Major League Baseball coverage, plus football Indiana game, and a little bit of hockey. It's all coming up right after this. I'll have to sit down. Yeah. Right. Okay, Andrea, make sure.
Welcome back to NewsFeed. I'm Andy Gossard with your sports. Over 109,000 were in attendance yesterday for Michigan's homecoming game against Indiana. The Maize and Blue jumped out to an early lead off a field goal from Hayden Epstein. Here, handoff to Anthony Thomas, driving, breaking tackles, sees the end zone, touchdown! Maize and Blue never let up after that. Drew Henson back to pass, lofts one up, finds David Terrell in the end zone, money in the bank. A-Train once again drives through no problem. Chris Perry breaking free, sees the green and the edge of the end zone. Keep those doggies rolling. With the score 45-0 at halftime, Drew Henson could safely bow out of the game after a job well done. Henson was 14 for 18 for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns. Second half, redshirt freshman John Navarre, more of the same. Hayden Epstein capped off this blowout with 2 fourth-quarter field goals. Final score, University of Michigan 58, Indiana 0. Exciting? Maybe not. Decisive? Definitely. The University of Michigan field hockey team lost a hard-fought battle yesterday against Wake Forest University 2-0. This is the second straight time the Wolverines have been shut out by one of the southern schools on the so-called Tobacco Road. Michigan is still first in the Big Ten with an undefeated conference record. They face the also undefeated Penn State Nittany Lions this Friday in what is sure to be a decisive match. Men's soccer fell to Michigan State 2-1 in double overtime earlier today. Michigan jumped out to an early 1-0 lead when Brian Peters put one in at 10:41. Later in the first half, Michigan gave up a costly penalty in the box, and the Spartans converted to tie the score. It remained tied for the rest of regulation, sending the game first into overtime, then to double overtime. Steve Williford of Michigan State finally brought the game to an end with his goal in the 107th minute. Coach Steve Burns will no doubt be talking to his team about keeping their intensity under control. In this very physical matchup, Michigan had 43 fouls called on them. Don't count the Seattle Mariners out yet. Earlier today, they fought back against the Yankees, winning 6-2 in Game 5. The Yankees still lead the series 3-2. In the National League last night, St. Louis got themselves on the scoreboards, beating the Mets 8-2. With the Mets still leading 2-1 in games, the chance of a Subway World Series is getting ever more likely. And coming up, your Ann Arbor weather. Here's Matt.
All right, thanks, Andy. That's Andy. I'm Matt. All right, right now we have a cloudy, wind conditions are calm with the temperatures outside 56. Just before we switch, we're going to talk about today a little bit. Today, of course, the winds and the skies were overcast, obviously. Visibility was reaching today about a max of 10 miles per hour, and our high reached the 60-degree mark with relative humidity at 100%. Moving on. Tonight, 40% chance of rain with patchy fog, so make sure to keep out if you're driving tonight. Our low will be in about 50 range degrees. Moving on tomorrow, mostly cloudy, of the high of 60 degrees. Our low will be 47 degrees, and that's pretty much how we're going to keep it for the rest of the week. It's going to stay that way through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, all around there in the 60s. It's going to get partly cloudy tomorrow and Tuesday, mainly more sunny, moving into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And into the weekend, it'll also be partly cloudy with lows in the 30s and mid-40s and highs still right there in the 60s. So it looks like, Andrea, we've got a little bit more fall weather before we move into the winter season. Andrea?
It does, Matt, but things still look pretty nice. No snow yet. Now for your entertainment news. Miss Hawaii Angela Perez Baracue, an elementary school gym teacher, was crowned Miss America 2001 last night. The 24-year-old said she plans to promote character education during her year-long reign as Miss America. Baracue guests when co-host Donny Osmond announced her name and then hugged first runner-up Miss Louisiana, Faith Jenkins, before ducking down to receive the crown and begin the traditional runway walk. Miss California, the first Asian American woman to win the state's title, was second runner-up, followed by Miss Mississippi, Christy May, and Miss Kentucky, Whitney Bowles. I'm very honored and very humbled, a breathless Baracue said after the crowning. Along with the crown, Baracue won a $50,000 scholarship. Now for business news with Matt.
Well, I'm really surprised that right after she won her crown, Andrea, she cried and hugged her first runner-up. I've never seen that before.
Oh, no,
never.
America.
No, not in Miss America. All right, in business news, Chevron Corporation, the number 3 U.S. integrated oil company, agreed today to create the fourth largest oil conglomerate in the world by acquiring larger rival Texaco Corporation for approximately $35 billion in stock. All right, Chevron is offering a swap of 0.77 of its shares for each of the outstanding shares of Texaco. That would value the company at 64.87 cents per share, or 18% premium above Texaco's price Friday. Chevron chairman and Chief Executive David O'Reilly is expected to be named the chairman and CEO of the combined company to be called Chevron Texaco, while Texaco Chief Officer Executive Peter Berger will serve as the vice chairman. All right. Andrea, with another fun edition of NewsFeed. I think make sure to tune in tomorrow night. Of course, we'll be having all of that SAPAC coverage, video highlights, and lots of news from there. All right, for Matt Engelberg.
And from Andrea Herzog, thank you for watching NewsFeed. Have a great night.